lead. I'm the communications lead from PlaceShapers, and you're very welcome today to our first communications bite size. It's part of our PlaceShapers learning program, where each month, 12 months, we focus on a different topic, on a subject that you say matters to you in your place shaping role. And this month, July, this hot month of July, we've been looking at members' roles as community anchors, and in particular, how that works when the pressure is on, when there are challenges, how community cohesion is fostered and nurtured, and how trust is built, earned. So today is going to be really topical on that. I've got a few points of housekeeping before we start. The first is that the session is being recorded. The second is that your cameras and microphones are switched off, so that'll stay that way throughout the session. The third is, though, that the chat is on. Now, a communications bite size is very different to a usual learning webinar for us, where we hear from members and there's lots of opportunities for discussion and to ask questions. But today it's really about you investing 30 minutes of time in return for an awful lot of learning, thanks to the generosity of our speakers today. But if you do have comments and questions, pop them into the chat. There may be an opportunity at the end to take some of them, but if not, our speakers have very generously said that they will work through those and we'll work out the best way to get the answers to you. So the background to today's bite-sized webinar is members saying to us, really since 2024, there has been an increase in discourse linking immigration to pressures in the housing system. And South Liverpool Homes were no exception. But what South Liverpool Homes have done is taken an organisation-wide approach to addressing that. So we're really fortunate today to have two terrific guests from the communications team to tell us about that. That's Michelle Bloore, who's the head of communications, and that's Eddie Allen, who is the senior communications officer. And I'm going to turn now to you, Michelle, because you're going to be telling us about what you've done, why you've done it, and then Eddie is going to very generously share with us what's happened, what difference it's made, and how you as members can take the transferable learning. So over to you now, Michelle.
Thanks, Joanna. Yeah, as Joanna said, I'm Michelle. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager at South Liverpool Homes. I have a small but wonderful team of 3. So today I'm going to talk about our campaign. And our campaign is Let's Talk Facts, Who Gets Our Homes? And this is a campaign about how we're responding to growing misinformation about social housing allocations in our communities. The campaign was led by our team, the comms team, and it had full support from our leadership team. And this is really important to emphasise that it's a challenging campaign. You know, it's a difficult topic to discuss and have conversations about, and you really need to have that support from the top. There was no budget. This was just something we delivered with very limited resources, and we really had to think creatively about how we was going to deliver the campaign. It's important to say that this wasn't just a communications campaign like we've delivered in the past. It was a campaign about trust, confidence, and helping people understand a really complex issue that was becoming increasingly influenced by rumour, by misinformation and online narratives. And often those online narratives were damaging and harmful to our communities where we work. Like many housing associations, we were seeing an increase in public debate about immigration and the lack of housing and who receives social housing. This is all part of a much wider national debate, as we'll have all seen. We've seen a rise in white national politics in the UK. We've had the largest far-right protest, I think, that we've ever seen in September 2025. And mainstream media like GB News, Talk TV, you know, they were all pushing that same narrative, that same immigration narrative. It's everywhere we look, isn't it? And it's not going away. So these debates and narratives, they were spilling online through our social media channels. So when we were talking about new homes, when we were talking about people who want, who were getting them, people were getting frustrated about who was getting these new homes. People have been on our waiting list for, say, 5, 10 years, and they were getting frustrated because they thought people would jump in the queue to get these homes, and they felt that was unfair, and they wanted answers. So like we recognize that if people wanted to trust us and they wanted to trust the allocations process, we need to explain it much more clearly and proactively rather than assuming people already understood it. We thought, as a team, this is something we can address. We had to keep reminding ourselves throughout this campaign. We can't control what people think and we can't solve this national issue. But what we can do, we can help people understand how we allocate our homes and the process involved. This is something we felt we could do as a housing association. It was something that we feel like the sector could do. And it was an eye opener to us as a team because we didn't, we didn't understand the allocations process fully. When we started this campaign, we thought we did, but we didn't. I think Ed might agree, we probably understood about 60-70% of the process. So if you look on screen, they're just some of the comments on our social media channels that we're dealing with. I imagine quite a lot of you are like seeing these comments on your social channels if you're, in the communications team. And they're quite damaging. We already this morning we've come into some comments. We put a news story which we thought was a lovely positive news story about people moving into a new home in Speak, and already those comments have started. Who's getting these homes, and how long they've been on the waiting list, and how long that they just don't feel like it was fair that the people who are moving into those homes have they gone through the process properly. And these damaging narratives that you can see, they're spreading very quickly, particularly when people are really frustrated about that lack of social housing. And if I'm honest, a year ago, as a team, we were really struggling with some of these comments. It got to the point where we're bracing ourselves every time we put something out on social media about new homes. But then we thought, at least we've got time. We've got time to craft a response to this. We're working the comms team, we're seeing it online, we're discussing those comments, how should we respond? But then we thought about our colleagues, the contact centre, front-facing colleagues. They don't have the beauty of this time. So, these conversations, they weren't just happening online, they were happening outside in our communities, in daily customer interactions with our residents, with our tenants. Just for one example we can give is we were doing a customer viewing with a housing officer, and then neighbours, not just one neighbour, a couple of neighbours came over, and they were saying, it was a viewing with a racially minoritised family, and they were saying, this family's not welcome here, we will drive the family out. That's the kind of things that our housing officers were dealing with, and they were struggling with it. So that was online, that all the comments that you can see online. But there was something happened last year, I think it was last March. And this is a real example that you can see on screen of an interaction we had with a resident. She visited our offices last year. She came in and she was questioning who was getting our homes. We were building a new scheme down in Speak, 92 new homes, and she'd heard that 95% of the homes would go to migrants, which was incorrect information. What did she do then? So she went to film a viral video that had 40,000 views. So she videoed in our office, she videoed outside our office. And this really did become the catalyst for our campaign. We knew we needed to act, and we needed to act fast. But we'll talk about how fast in a bit. It's very very easy to just jump straight onto a campaign after this without really putting some time and effort into having to think, okay, let's really look into this and let's look how we can deliver a campaign that's really meaningful. We had to be realistic about what we could achieve with the campaign. So our challenge here, it wasn't to win arguments. It was to create real opportunities for really honest conversations that was based on facts and based on evidence. We realise that we've left a vacuum by not explaining our allocations policy clearly enough, and this silence was allowing others to fill that information gap with misinformation and harmful narratives. So we knew we needed to provide it. We needed to provide accessible explanations, and explanations that were grounded in facts. So rather than making assumptions, we started with insight. We'd heard what was being said online in our communities, but it was often the same voices, the same like 6 or 7 people who had these views, who our homes were going to, and that kind of unfair narrative. And what we realised is we needed a wider range of views. We need to listen to our community and build our messages and our campaign around it. So we went to our leadership team, and if I'm honest, and they're quite happy for me to say this, they weren't keen on the idea of gathering further insight at first. They wanted to us act really quick and set the record straight, telling our customers, that they were wrong and that we do allocate homes fairly and what they were saying wasn't correct. However, as a team, we came together, and it was important for us to understand what our customers knew and also what they didn't know. And we need to support our colleagues as well to have these conversations confidently. Once this was fully explained to the exec team, they got on board. And I think I did agree, if we didn't take that time at the insight phase, I think we'd be delivering a very different campaign than we have now. So from the onset, the campaign was about listening first, and then designing content that addresses specific concerns about them and misconceptions that we uncovered. So what did this insight look like? Well, we carried out 2 surveys. We carried out a customer survey and we carried out a colleague survey. Talk about the customer survey first. So 522 customers completed the survey, which is our highest completion rate to date. Just to give you some context, we've got over 3,800 homes. So I mean, to some others, that 522 might not seem really high, but to us it is. But what it shows to us that this was a really important issue for our customers. The results highlighted a significant knowledge gap. More than 3/4, that's like 76%, they didn't understand how allocations work. They told us they didn't understand, either they only had a rough idea. 63% didn't believe that the process was fair. That's a start figure, and it was a figure that we used throughout our campaign when we're delivering our key messages about fairness and who gets our homes. And importantly, many people relying on social media and word of mouth for information, and this increased exposure to misinformation. And for us as a team, this demonstrated a clear need, not for more communication, but for better communication. We needed simpler explanations in plain English that we could explain our allocations process to our customers and to our colleagues. So we talked about the customer survey. We also carried out a colleague survey. We needed to find out what they knew about our allocations, front and back office. It's a bit different. Most felt familiar with the allocation policy. I think 76% said they felt very familiar with the policy and how it worked. But only 46% felt confident explaining it. That to me, that figure, that knowledge, that gap between knowledge and confidence, that was really interesting for us. So people felt like, okay, I know that process. I think I know it inside out, but can I explain that to customers? No, I don't. They felt like they didn't feel confident they were able to explain it. So what they told us, they wanted practical tools. They didn't want lengthy documents. They didn't want to read lengthy documents, in their own time or go through things on the internet. They wanted like instant information. They wanted FAQs. They wanted training, infographics, short videos. And that feedback from colleagues and from our customers, that shaped the resources that we created. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to hand over to Eddie, my team, and he's going to talk you through the delivery of the campaign and the sector toolkit and how you can use this and adapt it for your organisation.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi everyone. I'm Eddie, and I'm the Senior Communications Officer here at South Liverpool Homes. So I'm going to talk you through the campaign, how we delivered it, and how we're going to share our learnings across the sector. So after gathering those insights from colleagues and customers, we felt we were in a really strong position to build a campaign that addressed that central question of who gets our homes. So we began by creating a web page to act as a focal point for the campaign that brought together all that information about allocations in one place. That information was scattered across our website, so it was difficult for our customers to find, but it was also difficult for our colleagues to access as well and signpost to. So the web page sort of sets the scene. It talks about the world that we're living in, the challenges that we face when it comes to prioritising and allocating homes, before presenting those facts around allocation in plain English. So it includes things like mythbusters, FAQs, case studies, which have been drawn from real life people on our waiting list and their journeys through the system. And all this was designed to address those misconceptions that were highlighted in our customer survey. So the page became the focal point of our campaign, if you like, and it's become an incredibly useful resource for us and for our teams to refer people to as the campaign's progressed. So with the campaign webpage in place, we then went on to create a digital and print campaign that was supported by that webpage. So that digital and print campaign went across our social media, email newsletters, and printed tenant magazine. Now, the social media component of that campaign is probably the most critical and the most useful, because this was a space where the vast majority of those harmful narratives and misinformation was circulating and spreading. So the social content focused on busting common myths and explain the facts in a straightforward and non-confrontational way. Now, while this myth-busting content created some traction, it was the content that we posted, the sort of business as usual content that we were posting around new homes, that gained the most interaction. But this time, because we had the campaign in place and we had these resources in place, we had these solid campaign messages to fall back on, which allowed us to react confidently and set the record straight. So having gathered that insight from customers and developed a clear understanding of our own allocations process, because as Michelle mentioned before, at the very start of this campaign, we were asking questions of ourselves in terms of how our process worked, but we felt equipped at that point. We felt so much more confident answering these difficult questions that previously left us feeling really exposed as a comms team and as an organisation. But social media is one thing, but we recognise very quickly that the most valuable conversations you can have are those conversations which happen face to face. So as part of the campaign, we organised and delivered a series of informal drop-in Who Gets Our Homes events, and we staged them in community settings in our core communities. We deliberately picked venues where people felt safe, where people felt that they weren't on our turf. They were sort of neutral venues, if you like, places like community centres, children's centres, familiar places for people, where they feel that they could come and ask us questions directly. Now, going back to the sort of buy-in across the organisations, these sessions were delivered by our CEO and members of our senior leadership team. They were facilitated by us as a comms team, but they were delivered by ELT and SLT. So Anna, our CEO, she spoke about the big picture stuff, if you like. So she sort of introduced the sort of world that we're living in terms of our obligations as a nation, as a city, and as a housing association. So she looked at our obligations to house people under international law, under our national legal framework, and also our regulatory responsibilities as well. And then after that, our head of neighbourhood services and our housing and communities manager went through the nuts and bolts, if you like, of how allocations work for us. And they also spoke about how we work alongside our local authority, Liverpool City Council, to allocate homes to people in need. And then we went on to open the floor to questions. Crucially, though, we also provided an opportunity for customers to ask confidential one-on-one questions, because a lot of people came with their particular problem, with their particular set of circumstances. So we provided a sort of confidential space for people to have those, one-on-one questions answered. Now, when we first set about putting these in-person events together, we were quite concerned initially, given the sort of the amount of divisive comments online and some of the quite vitriolic comments that was online. And we were quite concerned about bringing people together, people from diverse backgrounds, often to discuss such a divisive topic. But we actually found that the face-to-face discussion that took place in these events was really respectful and focused on fairness, and didn't focus on race and ethnicity. So we were quite pleased. After being initially worried, we were quite pleased that we had successfully created this safe space for face-to-face discussion. And it allowed us to move beyond these social media comment threads where people are slinging mud at each other from behind the keyboards, and create a space for genuine sort of safe dialogue. And I think the people who came along appreciated the opportunity to have their questions answered by real people. And we've got some practical advice about organising these events in our toolkit. So what were our key learnings from the campaign? Well, the actual sort of first phase of the campaign took place over a period of 4 months. from November 2025 to February 2026. And in that time, we've learned a lot, and we're continuing to learn as we move from sort of campaign to business as usual. So we've learned that racism was a factor, but it wasn't the main driver. It was a lack of understanding of the allocations process that was the real main driver in all of this. We also found that showing empathy towards people was just as important as giving facts. Giving facts on their own, facts can often bounce off people who've got very entrenched views, but we found that having an empathetic response to start off with, it treated people like people. It treated people as equals, and it didn't treat people like idiots. And it was a really, really important sort of framing tool that we've used from the outset when we answer questions and when we develop our content. And we found that having difficult conversations, whether online or face to face, actually built trust in us as a listening organisation. The only other option really was silence, and silence just creates that space for misinformation to spread and to take hold. And I think finally, we found that having consistent, clear messaging around allocations, it really increased the confidence of our colleagues as well as our customers. So from the start, we knew that we weren't alone in dealing with misinformation around how social housing is allocated. But when we were designing and researching our campaign, we really struggled to find real examples out there online of similar campaigns from other housing providers and other people with other stakeholders, other people with vested interest in this. So that's why we did. That's why we built our own. But then at that point, we thought, well, we need to share this with other people. Once we've set it up, once it's running, once we've ironed out the bugs, and there were some bugs with it, we thought we need to share this with other people and produce a toolkit to give other providers like yourselves a head start. So we've designed something hopefully that you can adopt and adapt to suit your organisation and the issues that you're facing in your communities. So unpacking the toolkit a little bit, it basically takes you through the process that we went through when we created the campaign. So it takes you through things like identifying your audiences, identifying your key messages, getting buy-in from your senior management. That's really, really important. I know we've said it over and over again, but buy-in at a top level for this kind of campaign is super important because it allows you to create a campaign team that isn't just the comms team. For this campaign to work for us, yes, comms played a big part in it, but it involved ELT, it involved SLT, it involved our housing and communities officers, it involved feedback from our customer-facing team, our customer service, our call centre, because all of their insights and all of their viewpoints were really, really important in understanding the shape of the problem. And then the campaign goes on to giving you real sort of nuts and bolts information about delivering that campaign, planning those face-to-face events, and then measuring what success looks like at the end of your campaign. And speaking of success, and what does success look like for us? I think traditionally when we launch digital and print campaigns, we always look at measurables. We always look at things like website views, about social media interaction and engagement, things like that. For us, because this was such an emotive campaign, and it was as a campaign that was so focused on emotion and narrative, success for us was when our messages made that transition from campaign talk to being business as usual. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is, it could be when like key explanations from the campaign become everyday language. So that's when maybe one of our customer service team use our FAQs or our Mythbusters to address a query on the phone or on our web chat. Or it could be when one of our front-facing teams says to us that they feel more confident addressing issues around allocations and migration, thanks to having that clear, concise content to fall back on. So that for us, that's what success looked like. But it sort of raised another thing for us, another question, and that was, when do you know when your campaign has achieved that kind of cut through? And for us, it was earlier this year. It was in February of this year when a local green space campaigner called Lynn shared our myth-busting content on our local community Facebook group. Now, Lynn had seen increasingly polarized narratives online and race-based comments on her own posts. So she posted this post that you can see on screen on Speak Past and Present, which is one of the largest community Facebook groups in Liverpool with over 20,000 followers. So Lynn basically became a sort of advocate for us and helped spread the word about our campaign online, which I thought was a brave thing to do in the face of a lot of this, a lot of these online narratives. So it's times like this when people show allyship and then repeat accurate information within their own networks, then you know that your campaign is really beginning to work. But don't get me wrong, we've got still lots and lots of work to do. And every time we post about new homes, like we have this week with our Western Avenue development, we get negative racist comments. But the difference is now that we feel really equipped to answer them with clear facts. We feel like we've got strategies in terms of how to answer questions and techniques to engage people in a respectful way. And you'd be pleased to hear that that's the end of listening to me droning on. Just before I let you go, you'll see on screen a QR code to download the toolkit. There's also a web link. We'll share this with the group, I'm sure, Joanna, afterwards as well. But yeah, please take a look at the link and you can explore the campaign in more detail. You can download and read our campaign report, which takes you through a lot more detail in terms of how the campaign was delivered. Gives you lots more stats and lots more insights. But also, if you do that, we'd also really encourage you to tick the stay in touch option, because that will allow us to sort of form a community of like-minded organisations. We've already had over 50 organisations that downloaded the toolkit so far, which we're absolutely thrilled about. But we'd like to increase that number, and we'd like to sort of communicate with those people and see how you're getting on, see if you've got any questions, and find out how you've implemented the toolkit where you are. Okay, that's it from me. Thanks for listening, and over to you, Joanna.
Eddie, Michelle, I can tell from the chat and what I feel having listened to you, it's really generous of you to share something where communications has led the conditions for having open, transparent conversations. Many questions, I'm sure, in people's minds, but one for each of you, please. So not quite the end of you yet, Eddie. Firstly, Michelle, this one feels like one for you, about getting that stakeholder buy-in. You touched on the beginning about how actually what the senior management team wanted you to do was something quite different from what you as communicators felt was the right thing. How do you convince people more senior in the organisation that that's the right thing to do?
Yeah, good question. So it happened when we do an annual plan, an annual comms plan every year. And so we present that to the exec team as part of their monthly meeting. So when I was presenting it, we brought the idea of we wanted the flagship campaign for that year to be around who gets our homes to challenge these narratives. And that's when the conversation came up, great, let's do it. Let's get in the plan. Let's do it straight away. Let's do it now. And that's when, you're having those conversations with the right people in the room and saying, if we do that now, we're basing it on very, very small number of people here. And if we want to deliver a campaign that's meaningful, we do need to gather more insight than this. It's a really challenging subject. It's not just it's not a campaign where we're talking about our new kitchen program or something like that. It's a very emotive subject. So talking through that, explaining why we were doing it, and we have a good relationship with our exec team, and they really value our expertise in the team. So I think a combination of explaining what we're doing, the relationship we already had with the exec team, and the value they have, they put on our team, and the fact they do listen, was like. Anna will say, with gritty t-shirts, I was right, okay, then let's pause. Let's, do the insight. We know it's going to take another 3 months. But I know she says when she delivers some speeches about it, that she says it's a big learning for her. It's a big learning that she did actually listen to us, because she knows that some of the answers that came through from that, it wasn't really about racism, as we touched on before. We were in a vacuum, and that vacuum was being filled with misinformation. So I hope that answers your question a little bit on how we got people on board.
Absolutely. And then just to wrap up, one question for Eddie. What's the one sort of nugget of advice that you would give if someone's looking to relay this insight that you had to colleagues?
From the colleague perspective, I th I think it's sort of similar. It's similar to what Michelle has said. I think getting that colleague insight from the beginning really. The issue needed no explaining to our colleagues, our front-facing colleagues. We're dealing with people coming into the office. Our neighbourhood officers were dealing with people doorstepping people that they were showing around, as Michelle said before. But I think going out to colleagues like we did with the survey and really finding out what the issues were, because these are these are all these issues are based on assumptions, and the worst thing that we could have done at the start was make our own assumptions about what was happening and what our colleagues were facing. So just going out to the colleagues straight away and asking questions, speaking to our front-facing teams and saying, what are the issues you're facing? What's your understanding of our process? And just that insight gathering thing. It might it like Michelle said, the temptation just to jump on the problem and try and answer questions straight away was really, really strong. But taking that time and doing that work around insight gathering really brought colleagues along with us on the journey.
Thank you so much, Eddie. So much insight from Michelle and Eddie, so much communications insight. I'm so sorry that we haven't got more time with you, but we're all going to be downloading the toolkit, and we will definitely be ticking the stay in touch button. I've just got to say a big thank you to Michelle and Eddie for sharing so generously. It's a perfect part of our focus in July on members as community anchors. Tomorrow, 20 members are going to see Moscow St Vincent in Manchester. So there'll be lots of learning coming out of that. And then come August, our attention turns to another really topical issue, designing services with and for residents. We've got a webinar on the 12th of August about that, and we're going to be learning from North Devon Homes and from the Pioneer Group in Birmingham about what they've done and how they've brought about meaningful change. We've got also 5 brilliant ideas in 5 minutes, which we're going to be sharing later on in the month. So it's going to be a farewell from Michelle, Eddie, and myself. A thank you again to Michelle and Eddie. I'll be sending round the recording if you'd like to re-listen to it, and of course the clickable link. And look forward to seeing you at another session soon. Goodbye, everyone.